Today I thought I'd talk about killing addictions. I'm just remembering a story from many years ago when I was trying to develop myself and improve myself and gain more energy and more access to my potential. And I remember sitting on a train going to a book signing and reading a book on Kabbalah, and I'd been reading a lot of stuff because reading was part of the way I expanded my second self. The education was how I kind of dissolved old core beliefs and created new, wider, further reaching beliefs. They call it, or I call it, maximizing perception. So we work through perception. Our reality is created by perception. If we can maximize perception, it means we can live in an unlimited world. Obviously that's the utopia we're looking at. If we shrink our perceptions and work from negative perceptions and get caught up in mind and get caught up in the world, then we start creating dystopia. So we create limitation and fear and anger and all the rest of it. So I was reading this book, and it must have been a tipping point for me because I'd been reading voraciously. I had a massive appetite to go out and collect essence and nectar and flavours from all of these great books, like the Kabbalah and the Torah and the Quran and the Gita and all these wonderful books. So I was picking up flavours, but there was a compulsion. I was led by intuition. My intuition was saying, read these books, go out and absorb these books, expand your belief, challenge the reality that you live in, challenge your old perceptions. So I'd read a lot, and there was an accumulation of knowledge and accumulation of expanding awareness and expanding perception. And then one day I just read this one line, and it was transformative to me because it obviously just came at that right tipping point. That's why books can be really important, and podcasts and articles and films and talks. They can be really important because one line can transform your life. I remember writing on the front of my book Shapeshifter, this book could change your life in an hour or a day or something like that I wrote. And somebody reviewed it and said they thought the book was great, but they thought that was an arrogant thing to say. But it wasn't an arrogant thing to say, it was a true thing to say. It was true. One line at the right point, at the right time, can be transformative. So this line in the Kabbalah was transformative to me. And it said that you think you can flirt with your addictions. You can't flirt with your addictions. Either you have addictions or you don't have addictions. Either they're alive and they're a threat, or they're dead. So the concept was that we rationalize our addictions and we avoid looking at our addictions, and we justify our addictions, and we justify the expenditure of energy on addictions and pornographies and excesses. Because it means we don't have to look at it, we don't have to let go of it, because from the mindset we're in, it feels as though we have to give something up. But it's not about giving anything up. From the inside of an addiction, and the addiction might be gossiping, it might be engaging in negative thoughts, it might be criticizing people, it might be judgment, it might be sexual pornography, it might be violent pornography. It could be any number of things. It could be food, it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be people pleasing. It could be addictions to beliefs. People hold on to their core beliefs like their very life depends on it. So we defend these beliefs sometimes with our life because we don't want to challenge them, and we rationalise them. The rationalisation is a defence mechanism. It's a Freudian defence mechanism. It's how we protect ourselves from looking at something that's not true. We might be downloading illegal material from the internet and justifying that that's fine, but we don't want to see ourselves as a thief. We don't want to spend money on buying it, so we download it and we justify it by saying, well, they make loads of money and information should be free, etc., etc. All the weak rationalisation that's at the very low end of consciousness. But the bottom line is we're stealing. We don't want to call ourselves a thief. So we just say all material should be free. It should be downloaded. We should have access to information. Information should be free. And all, the usual things people say. But that doesn't really spread across the board, because everything is information. I'm giving you information now. I'm offering it free. But equally, every material object in this room that I'm sitting in at the moment is made up from information and energy. Everything in our reality is made up from information. And the universe is based on the concept of exchanging energy or exchanging information. And there's a cost for that. Sometimes the cost is physical, sometimes it's just emotional, sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's physiological, sometimes it's psychological, sometimes it is sociological, but there's an exchange of energy. And the exchange of energy is determined by what aspect we're working in at the time. So coming back to the centre again, we don't want to acknowledge that we're thieves. We sleep with our wife or we sleep with our husband, and while we're doing it, we think about somebody else. We think about our next door neighbour or our friend at work or somebody we've seen on the internet. We don't want to see ourselves as betraying. We don't want to think of ourselves as being a cheat, even though it's common knowledge in esotericism that that's betrayal at the first level. It's first level betrayal. The unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what you very strongly, viscerally imagine and what you actually do. So as far as your mind is concerned, the betrayal has taken place. There's also a disassociation when we sleep with our partner. Again, this is at the higher end of esotericism. This is about conserving and retrieving energy. But we don't like to see ourselves as a cheat. We say things that we know are not true. We put things out into the world that we know are not true. Deep down we know they're not true. And then when people challenge them, we just say, oh, it's just what I thought, it's just what I heard. But deep down we know we're a liar. We know that we are a liar when we do that. But we don't want to see ourselves as a liar. We don't want to see ourselves as a cheat. We don't want to see ourselves as a thief. If you fiddle your tax, you might fiddle your tax for 10 quid, 20 quid, 30 quid. And it doesn't seem like much. Maybe your accountant says, it's okay, everybody does that. We all do that. But actually, to do that, you have to lie and you have to cheat. But we don't like to call ourselves a liar and a cheat, because that's very difficult to look at. Who wants to look in the mirror and see a liar and a cheat or a thief? So we have, I don't know, say we have bootlegged material for our computer, and we rationalise it because we say the company's a multi-billion-pound company, they can afford it. Somebody once gave me a gift of the whole Beatles set copied, and he said to me, it's okay because they've made enough money from this already. But the bottom line was he had to lie and cheat to give me a gift that didn't belong to him, and I couldn't accept the gift. And it was hard to say to him because I love this guy and he was a friend of mine. But the bottom line is he was lying, he was cheating, he was asking me to lie and cheat, because we're working within society, we're working within laws. We agree to these laws, we vote these laws in or we vote them out, and then we think we can go against them and it's okay, we rationalise it somehow. But the bottom line is we have to lie and cheat to do that. So it's starting to inquire into all of these areas, and I'm not talking about a moral and an ethical issue necessarily. I'm just talking about the idea of this podcast is to talk about where we lose energy and where we can retrieve energy. And this line in the Kabbalah that I read that said, you think you can flirt with your addictions. And I was addicted to jealousy, I was addicted to judgment, I was addicted to alcohol, I was addicted to sexual pornography, I was addicted to bullying, I was addicted to lying, I was addicted to drama. I didn't know all these things. Like I said in one of the previous podcasts, 95% of our perceptions are unconscious. I was asleep. I wasn't, I wasn't even aware consciously I was doing it. When I became aware consciously as I was doing it, it was jarring to look in the mirror and see a bully, see a liar, see a cheat, see a thief. You know, see somebody that was indulging in all of the vices. I was indulging in all the vices. Morally, ethically, we can go down that path, but actually I'm just looking at the conservation of energy. All of my energy was locked into those addictions. I was just being completely depleted. So I've got several dishes all pointing in the same direction. The way to be powerful in life is to bring all of your dishes, all of your intentions, all of your energy, all of your 100 billion cells in one direction. So your sentinel ego, your authentic self, your sentinel ego, your mind, your sensual body, your physical body are all working together in the same direction. Not one pushing forward, one pushing back, one going to the side, one going to the right, one going to the left. Everything moving in the same direction. To do that, we have to retrieve the energy that's locked into our addictions and stop pretending that we can flirt with these addictions. These addictions are dangerous because when they rise up, if we don't dissolve them, if we don't refrain from them, then they incarnate us and we become jealousy, we become anger, we become fear, we become judgment, we become criticism, we become anger, we become hate. We become all of those things, and that's not becoming to us as a species. That's not, for me anyway, that's not where I want to be. I don't want to wake up in the morning and think that's my day. My day is about going out and creating. My day is about going out as a magi and creating from love. I don't want anything in my life that isn't love. So this line in the book said, you think you can flirt with your addictions, but you can't flirt with your addictions. Either they are dead or they're a threat. Either they are dead or they are usurping energy, draining energy, like big leaks in the conduit. So my job then became to think, fucking hell, I am flirting with addictions. I am pretending I can go 100% forward even though 50% was going to the left and 30% was going to the right and 10% was going backwards or 50% was going backwards or whatever. I was moving in 10 directions at the same time and pretending I was moving forward. I was a busy fool. So the key then became to do a personal inventory and start to highlight these places where I was addicted. And bearing in mind, when you're inside an addiction, you feel as though you're being asked to give something up. When you're on the outside of the addiction, you know you've escaped. You don't feel as though you've given anything up. You feel as though you've escaped. So there is excess in less, and there is less in excess. So when we contract, that's, even if I take an example of if I just have 6 squares of concentrated dark chocolate. It's just 6 squares. I have less, you know, maybe people will eat 2 or 3 bars of chocolate, so I have less of it, but the flavours are massively enhanced. So if I contract, say if in my head I'm sleeping with my wife, but in my head there's lots of different images and lots of different people that I'm bringing in to stimulate that. So I'm adding unnecessary flavour to something that's already beautiful. If I get rid of all those excesses and just have a monogamous relationship with my wife, just me and her, just me having sex with her, me intercoursing just with her, the flavour is hugely enhanced because I've contracted. I've brought it down just to the concentrate. And it's so beautiful, that interconnection then between what you eat because you're eating less, what you drink because you're drinking less, what you intake or what you ingest. So we ingest less and we get excess. And when we get excess, we get less. Because like in the old days, it was a common saying around my friends, if we have 12 pints of beer, but we don't remember the last 9. So the first 3 were nectar. There was real, but after that we just had more and more chasing the same essence, but the essence came from less. It didn't come from excess. Same as anything else. So it's rather than trying to get more, we're trying to get less. And this is the same internally with the egoic projections, the addictions, the attachments, the fears, the worries, the envies, the jealousies. When we contract them, when we do an inventory and highlight them and contract them, as we contract, our conscious net expands. So as we take power away from our addiction, our unique, authentic self massively expands. So then we experience an expansion of consciousness. And an expansion of consciousness just means that our awareness expands. So it's like if you imagine that your reality is just one room in the house of 100 rooms, but your reality is just one room and you're not aware of the other 99 rooms. The expansion of consciousness just means that someone gives you a key and shows you room number 2, or room number 3, or room number 4. So as your awareness expands, you become conscious of wider perspectives, wider potential, and you become conscious of deeper meanings. So you look at something like, I don't know, say if you read in the Bible, and the Bible talks about the 3 kings coming to the birth of Christ. On a normal level of consciousness, that's about 3 kings coming to worship the birth of a new king. That's what the Bible tells us. When you inquire into that and you go deeper into that, if your conscious net expands and it goes deeper and it deepens, you suddenly look at the same thing and you see a deeper meaning. So suddenly you're thinking, they're not actually 3 kings, they're 3 magi, 3 shamans who travel from the Orient, or they travel from afar to the birth of Christ. And they bring their 3 gifts. They bring frankincense, myrrh, gold, frankincense and myrrh. So when your conscious net deepens, maybe you just look at that in a different way. So maybe you're looking at it and thinking, it's the birth of Christ represents the birth of Christ's consciousness, or it means the birth of awareness, the birth of consciousness. And these 3 kings that come to visit are bowing down to the birth of consciousness. So consciousness is the sudden birth of intuition. Intuition with acoustic clarity. Intuition is the divine sat-nav. And the 3 kings could represent the mind, the ego, the mind and the body. So these 3 kings, the ego thinks it's the king of the body, the mind thinks it's the king, and the sensual body thinks it's in charge. These 3 kings bow to the true king, which is consciousness, which is awareness, which is intuition. And the gifts they bring are gold, which represents the gold body, which is virtue, represent frankincense, which in biblical terms represents prayer. It means the mind in constant prayer. So instead of the internal dialogue constantly talking away in the background on automatic pilot, following one story after another like a tabloid newspaper, we take over the internal monologue and we pray, or we talk, or we speak gratitude, or we speak positive, or we project inspirational, aspirational love. So we start to, instead of the dialogue just chattering away, we either observe it from above or we manually take over it. And myrrh was a compound that they used to put on people that were dead, so it represents death. And of course, when you think about how we create, we take in food, we take in influences, we take in impressions, we bring them into the body, we basically decompose them, or we kill them, we bring them into the stomach. The stomach is like a furnace. The furnace reconstructs this energy and creates energy. It creates shapes, it creates potentials. So I can take the energy from the sun and from the air and from the food and from the impressions. I can bring it into my body and I can make it into a workout. I can make it into a book or an article. I can make it into this podcast. So this podcast is about me taking impressions that I've been given, that I've been gifted, and they come in one form. I bring them into my body, they die in my body, and they reconstruct, or they transcend in my body. Death's probably the wrong word. And they reform into the shape of this podcast, or the shape of a film, or the shape of a book, or the shape of an article, or the shape of love, if I can transform it into love. So a deeper consciousness means we just see more into something that was already there. So you look at in the Torah, it says God, in Genesis, God created the world in 7 days, and you think that's a level of consciousness. I understand the concept of that. Whether it was real or not, it doesn't really matter. The subtextual context of that, the deeper context or the deeper meaning, could be that man was created over 7 stages, and the 7th most advanced stage is where man works from a place of love, and at that place of love, that place of selfless service, the service itself is the reward, because we receive bliss when we serve. Because when we serve, there is a dissolution of separation. If I serve you, the separation between me and you as objects and subjects disappears. It's just a feeling of connection, a feeling of intercourse. So when you serve from love, not only does it serve you, or it serves me, it serves everybody. It works on everybody. We get 7.5 billion followers on Twitter all in one go, because we are working from a place of love. It resonates out to everywhere. So the concept can be God created the world in 7 days, or the subtextual meaning, if you have a deeper consciousness, when you look into it deeper, can mean that man was created over 7 stages, and each advancing stage takes him closer and closer to working from love. And the process then is getting rid of anything in your life that isn't love. So in the Quran they talk about surrendering the tongue, surrendering the eyes, surrendering the mouth, surrendering the stomach, surrendering the genitals. So surrendering all of these things and giving them over to service. So eventually we just surrender to love, or a frequency of love, or a place of love. So the consciousness expands and the consciousness deepens. So we see wider and further, and we see deeper. So then you can't even watch a film at the cinema without seeing the divine subtext. So if you go to watch a kids film like Legoland, it's a children's film. It doesn't say, you think, well, it's a children's film, who's going to go and see a children's film? You might tell your wife you're going to go and see Legoland, and she'll look at you strangely. Are you sure you want to go and see Legoland? It's for fucking 8-year-olds. But when you go to see Legoland, you watch one of the greatest metaphysical films ever written. It's a film about how we create reality from everything that's already around us. We break the bricks down and we rebuild it into different shapes at the right time for the right purpose. And we do that using massive imagination and working from an aligned place. It's an amazing metaphysical film about overcoming and refraining from conditioning, having the courage to do that, and then working from a place of love and service, and creating from the building blocks that are already all around us. So a deeper consciousness allows you to watch something that most people will see as a children's film, and see a metaphysical doctrine on how to create reality. If you go and watch How to Train Your Dragon, a children's film about a black dragon that comes into this Viking village and wreaks havoc, so they keep trying to kill it. And one kid says, I don't want to kill it. I don't want to have an enemy as a black dragon. I want to find it. I want to befriend it. So he finds it and he feeds it. It's injured, he befriends it. And then because he befriends it, he learns to... The dragon falls into its service because the dragon loves it. The dragon, of course, represents the ego. So it's a children's film, but it's actually about control of the ego. It's about using love to bring the ego into subservience. So the ego serves the mind, and the mind So the ego serves the authentic self, the intuition, and the mind serves the ego, and the physical and sensual body serves the mind. So there's this hierarchy, and when the hierarchy is in place, suddenly there's no separation between body, mind, ego, authentic self. There's just this absolute one authentic self. So the way to get to that place is to kill addictions. But before we can kill addictions, we have to recognize addictions. Before we can find out who we are, we have to find out who we're not. So that's the whole idea of identifying where we have addictions, identifying where we have judgments, where we're cynical, where we're angry, where we're jealous, where we're vengeful. You don't have to look far. You know, just look around the house, look in the mirror, look at your tweets, look at your Facebook feeds, look at your correspondence at work, look at the way you treat the least of us, look at the way that you treat the people around you, look at the way you change masks according to the company you're in. You know, the mask you wear for the boss at work isn't the mask you wear for the down and out in the street. The mask you wear for the down and out in the street isn't the mask you wear when you're with your wife. The mask you wear when you're with your wife isn't the mask you wear when you're with your secretary at work. The mask you wear with the secretary at work isn't the mask you wear when you're out with the lads. They're all different faces, they're all different personalities. To be authentic, we need to try and find our one true self and be that one true self in all company. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he said I wear a different mask according to the company I'm in. He said, you know, sometimes they don't know who I am. And I said, when do you feel like you're best, most authentic? He said, when I'm with my son, it's just bliss. He said, when I'm with my son, there's no edit. It's just me and my son. He said, and I just feel love. And he said, I also like it when I go on stage and sing. He said, I just do it for a bit of fun, but when I go on stage and sing, I'm completely unedited. That's who I am. So I said, that's okay, we've identified that. So that person there is who you should put in front of your boss, who you should put in front of the down and out, who you should put in front of your business associates, who you should put in front of your wife. Have that, train yourself to have that same authentic self, whoever you're in front of. To do that, we need to start looking at where we're addicted. You know, we might consciously say we don't like our addictions, but they're giving us some kind of satiation. We're getting some kind of feed from it. They're quite delicious, and when we try to get rid of our addictions, they kick off. I call this fracking. When I teach my writers group, I ask them to frack. I ask them to go deep. I ask them to go into pockets of energy that they've hidden away from. The jealousies, the angers, the fears, the judgments, the terrors, the shames. Go into there, frack, bring it out, but be careful when you do it, because when you rattle the shadows on the inside, you'll see the shadows rattling on the outside. When you start moving stuff in the organism, you start moving stuff in the organization. When you start moving stuff in the physical body, you start moving stuff in the world body. You will see disturbances in the external world when you start moving the internal world. I can always guarantee that when I bring out anything profound, like the caretaker, profound life-changing knowledge that was intuited to me, fragile, the pyramid texts, Romans 12:20, Romans, brown paper bag, bounce out, all films with massive energy, massive truth. Some of these are films we're doing this year. We're doing about 4 films this year. And incidentally, I'm able to do these films. I've got 4 films and 2 books and a stage play this year. And I can only be that prolific because I've got all my dishes pointing in the same direction. All the energy that used to be locked into my addictions is poured forward into creative, instructional material that comes from a place of love. Everything's in the same direction. So we ask people to frack, but every time I do those, every single time I bring out something profound and I move shadows in me, I see a corresponding reference of shadows in the external world. on the internet, in my company, in my environment, sometimes really close to me in my family. I see shadow. I move shadows internally. I see shadows kicking and screaming outside, and their kicking and screaming will come in the form of criticism or judgment or hate or anger or whatever you want to call it, but it's because I've moved stuff in me. I just stop feeding it in me, and because I stop feeding it in me, you see the representations in the world starving because they're not sharing essence with me anymore. So it's good to do it. If you can take away from this, just do a physical, psychological, physiological, sociological, spiritual inventory. Look at your life. Look at the gross things first. Look at the parts of you that are not you. When you're judgmental, when you're angry, when you're cynical, when you hate, when you lie, when you cheat, all of those little subtle areas. Even if they are just even if they seem very subtle, even if you've managed to rationalize it somehow, look at those areas. If you are divided against yourself, your world will be divided. If you harbour and feed hate or anger or judgment in any of the names, you've got 100 billion cells that are infused with that caustic cocktail, and that's what you're going to project out into the world. If you don't trust yourself, you won't trust the world. You won't trust anybody. This is what mostly when I'm working with people, I ask them the question I asked me: do you trust yourself? And when people think about it, mostly they don't trust themselves because they're doing lots of things that they've been doing for so long that they don't even question it anymore. They just have a background noise of anxiety and distrust and cynicism. It's because it's in them. It's not because it's in the world. The world is just a reflection. The world is just a mirror. It's just showing you what's in you. The world is your teacher. You know, what you see on the screen is what's coming from the film. Don't blame the screen. Don't blame the projector. Don't blame the light. They're fine. Just look at what's on the film. The film is your perception, your cognition, your karma. If you don't like what's on the film, you can change what's on the film. That takes a lot of hard work because, as we said before, changing perceptions harder than changing addiction. So we start with the addictions. We stop feeding the shadows, and as we stop feeding the shadows, they will rise up and they'll want to be fed. We observe them, but we don't identify. We observe them, but we don't engage them. We observe them, but we don't allow them to incarnate us. We let them store around the stomach and around the heart, what Dante Alighieri calls the horn of the chest. We use that as a furnace. We observe them in the furnace. We watch them. We feel them with anxiety. We feel them in the form of anxiety and fear and discomfort. If we just observe them, if we have a very strong will and just observe them, they will dissolve. The nature of the fear or the anxiety or the addiction will be liberated, and the effulgence will expand out into you as gold. So you develop a gold body or a virtuous body by killing addictions, or by helping addictions to transcend. The word killing always provokes the wrong feelings because we think we're killing something. We're not. Nothing actually ever dies. We're just transforming stuff. But it's uncomfortable because we are the furnace in which it's broke down, in which it's processed. Geoff talks about conscious labour, deliberate suffering. Conscious labour because we are the industry. I'm the industry that has to create my books, my films, my podcasts, my talks, my articles, my journalism, all of the different things I'm creating in the world. I'm the industry that does that. It doesn't happen on its own. And so that's conscious labour. Deliberate suffering is that we have to recognise that the energy that we bring in the form of impressions, and the energy that we have inside of us in the form of stored impressions or perceptions, has to be burned up in the furnace and reconfigured to create something new in the world. Once we get this, we realise that everything is just. Everything that happens to us can be good if we've got the courage and the insight and the discernment to be able to take any information that comes in, whether it's love, hate, whether it's positive, negative, indifferent. It's just energy. It comes in. We can churn up in the furnace and we can deliver it through our labour and create prolifically in the world. And then everything is just. So somebody criticised me a few years ago. I mean, this is how I live. People have been criticising me for, you know, ever since I wrote my first book. So what I do is I take those impressions, I make sure the criticism isn't, you know, if there's anything in there I can learn from it, I'll take that, I'll try and tighten my game. But mostly the criticism is ill-informed, it's ignorant, it's just people throwing essence out, trying to feed. What I'll do is I'll take the essence, I'll bring it into myself, and I will transform it from the hate it's been delivered in into pure love, into pure function, into a product. So I might sell a book, I might sell a film for 40 grand, or I might sell an article for £500, or I might create a DVD set that sells, you know, hundreds or thousands. I might deliver it into a talk that I get paid £2,000 for. I may just go out and churn it over and use it as energy for a run, or a bag session, or a yoga session. So basically, if people throw their essence at you, you're able to take the essence, like the McLaren in Back to the Future. Eventually it can fuel itself on any old rubbish. So whatever comes in, if people want to throw their essence at you, and obviously, you know, you wouldn't get a skilled player doing that, only an amateur would do that, because it's the lower game. But if they did, and they were if they did throw their essence at you, then, you know, you can process it and you can create from it. So people are just sending you bags of money, bags of coin. There's energy everywhere. And if you are, what they say is if you're a magi, you can create from the energy in your own body. If you're a magician, I'm talking about biblical terms, you can create from energy in the environment as well. So if people throw their energy at you in whatever form, I had a guy criticising me many years ago, very vitriolic, very angry, accused me of all sorts of things, called me a cockroach and stuff like that. I was able to take his energy and I was able to create prolifically in the world with that energy. But once that energy is sent over to me and I process it, if I don't engage it and I don't identify with it, and I'm able to process it from an objective, neutral place, or from a place of love, I can transform it into whatever I want. But once that person sent that essence over, they can't get it back again. So it hugely depletes them. That's why you have to be really careful when you have to be careful about what you think and what you say and what you do, because you are using essence. And if you're working with anybody any good, and they don't receive that essence, your essence is going to die in the air, or you're going to give it away to somebody. That's another story, actually, so I'm not going to go into that at the moment. But the key is kill the addictions, and one of the addictions is engaging negativity. It's if we engage negativity, we feed it. If we express negativity, we give it a feast. We think that we can engage gossip and then express gossip and it's okay, but you could lose a whole day's essence, a whole day's energy that you've stored up just in a 5-minute gossip. And if you start working in the world with discerning people, the moment the essence comes out in the form of negativity, it will die in the air. If you were to sit with my daughter and bring that out, it would die in front of you. And you'd be aware very quickly that you've lost something vital. The only reason people are able to sustain it is because other people keep feeding it. So it's amateurs feeding amateurs all the time. We need to get our game above that. We need to get our game way above that. We need to get everything outside of our life, everything in our life that is not love, get rid of it. Everything in our house that is not love, get rid of it. Anything in your garden that's not love, get rid of it. Anything that's not love. Any morsel of shame or anger or fear or judgment or jealousy, no matter how you rationalise it, no matter how you justify it, if it's not coming from a place of love and you don't feel love when it comes out, get rid of it. Get rid of it. There's a great poem by Rumi where he says, fear knocked on the door, love answered, no one was there. That was the poem, and I like to add to it, jealousy knocked on the door, love answered, no one was there. Cynicism knocked on the door. Love answered, no one was there. Judgment knocked on the door. It rapped on the door. It kicked the door. Love opened the door. No fucker was there. Envy, greed, sloth, any of the virtue, any of the vices, they knock on the door, they come and knock on your door, they throw a stone at the window, they rap on your letterbox, they boot your door, they bang your door, they bang the window. Love answers, no fucker is there. Nobody is there. Love, it's about love, and not love as an emotion, love as a frequency, love as a place. Love is not a subtle argument, the door there is devastation. That's Rumi again. Rumi was a great metaphysical poet, and his words, if you read Rumi, if you read the big red book of Rumi, the words, just reading the words are healing. Just reading the words, because they come from a divine place, are healing. It's beautiful. They've got me through a lot of difficult times because they are balm. And he says that love is not a subtle argument. He said it's a place. And to get there, you have to go through the door with devastation on. In other words, you have to bypass the mind. You have to devastate the mind. It's not a mind thing, it's not an intellectual thing. Love is not a subtle argument, the door there is devastation. Love is a place. To get there, we have to bypass mind, and to do that, we have to bypass the physical body, the sensual body, the mind body, the egoic body, and they are terrified of awareness and consciousness because there's a new king in town. That's what consciousness is, that's what awareness is. I'm aware that the biblical language can put people off, but just think of it as expanded awareness. If you start working just from love, no illness will be able to exist in your body. It won't be able to exist. And I'm aware that, you know, I don't want to sound arrogant with that, because I've been in a place of illness and it's very difficult to access love when you're there. I'm aware of that, so please don't think I'm being arrogant. What I'm saying is, if you can access love, illness or dis-ease cannot exist. So we get rid of anything that's not love. And that includes all the stuff we're talking about before, about the addictions, about the attachments to old knowledge, about the attachments to old core beliefs, about the attachment to fear. Fear, jealousy, anger, cynicism, judgment, all of those things will feed you on a level, because it's still essence, but it's very low level and it's dense, and it leaves lots of room for division, lots of rooms for illness, lots of rooms for unhappiness, lots of rooms for depression. All of those emotions feed us at some level, and we swap back and forward. We swap our negativity back and forward with people, and we feel satiated by it, but actually it's just depleting. We're not creating anything with it. So anything that's not love, fuck it off. Anything that's not love, get rid of it. Go around your house now, get rid of any books that don't have love. Get rid of any furniture, get rid of any old bits of stuff that's still carrying anger and hate. Get rid of it. Just love, we just want love. If it doesn't come from love, it's the weak cousin. If it doesn't come from love, it's not going to serve you. Go to the place of love and just let it course through your body. And create any energy you get. Eventually, at the highest level, whatever energy comes in, you can churn it over, you can put it through the furnace, you can process it, you can turn it into love, and you can get better and better at doing that. But the concept again is just that we're working from addiction. In esotericism, they call it feeding the bear. If these things rise up and we engage them and we identify with them, they incarnate us, and it's called feeding the bear. We feed the shadow. Once you understand you don't want these things in your life because they don't serve you, you stop feeding them. When they rise up as emotions, as feelings, as judgments, as projections, we observe them, but we don't engage them. We observe them, but we don't identify with them. We observe them, but we don't feed them. When we do that, the bear feeds us. So either we're feeding the bear, or the bear is feeding us. That's a choice. There's a great book to get on this if you get a chance. My book, Beginner's Guide to Darkness and Shadow Hunter, is very good for this, but there's a great book by Eckhart Tolle called The Power of Now, and the technique in there is purely about developing the observer and dissolving, he calls them pain bodies, dissolving pain bodies through observation, through deep introspective observation. There are other techniques. You can search out people like Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber's a brilliant man, and he has very advanced techniques on this process of feeding the bear or not feeding the bear. So as we're able to observe the bear or the emotions or the negativity as it rises up and observe it without engagement, these vices actually feed us, because we're able to observe and refrain rather than observe and resist, or observe and fall into fear. If we fall into fear or judgment or intellectualization, it feeds it. Suddenly this fear or this addiction or this shadow gets muscular and strong, and eventually you haven't got control of your life. This shadow has. Once you get it, you can start observing the shadow as it rises. Not engaging it, but observing it without engagement, observing it without identification, observing it without allowing it to incarnate us. That's the technique. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it says when you die, and this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the birth of consciousness and the death of egoic rule. When you die, demons will rise up. If you recognize the demons of your own making, you'll be able to escape them. If you don't recognize them and you fall into fear, these demons will incarnate you, and you will be reincarnated back into that place. So in other words, when we start to expand consciousness and we stop feeding our shadows, they will rise up. And if we're able to observe them without identification, they will feed us, so that the bear will feed us. If we don't observe them without identification and we identify and engage them, then we will be reincarnated. So instead of observing jealousy, observing fear, observing cynicism, observing gossip, observing jealousy, instead of observing it, we're engaged in it. So then we become jealousy, we become anger, we become violence, we become fear, because it's incarnated us. It's a slow process. It takes quite a lot of getting your head round, but you'll see it in your everyday life. And the moment you observe it in yourself, you'll start observing it in the people around you. You'll have a massive expansion of awareness, and you will see the world in an entirely different way. And you'll recognize that in order to change the world, all you need to do is change yourself. Challenge the old conditioning, challenge the old fears, challenge the old beliefs. It takes a lot of courage. And you can start with the basic things. Start with getting control of your palate, what you eat, what you drink, what you ingest, what you read, your impressions. And again, watch how people scatter around you. Watch how people react when you just make the smallest changes. You give up alcohol, you'll lose probably 50% of your friends. You give up meat. If you were to give up meat, you'd lose. Lots of people just wouldn't suddenly understand you. If you stop gossiping with people, you'll lose probably nearly all your workmates at work, because they will have nothing to talk to you about. Because they want to come in and they want to slaughter people at the dinner table. That's what they do. That's what people do. But that doesn't serve us. When you stop doing that, people will notice. Then you'll find yourself elevated to different company, better company, to a higher level of sustenance. And eventually your impressions are just love. You're just working from art, working from instruction, working from love. It's really, really worth looking at and really worth doing. If you want to check out Eckhart Tolle, if you want a deeper insight, check out Geoff. Geoff can be a bit of a head foot, because he's so astute, so discerning, very, very challenging. Ouspensky, In Search of the Miraculous. He wrote a book called In Search of the Miraculous. There's lots of stuff out there if you start to search, but again, it's not about knowing, it's about doing. But knowing sometimes comes before doing. Sometimes knowing comes after doing. Sometimes we discover something and then we know the principle afterwards. But the main thing is to try and take one thing away today and work on it. Just one thing. Take one thing and work on it.